Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
What's that? It's another episode of Medium Duty at Large. I am Kevin Linger, joined today, as always, by my faithful host, Stalwart Guardian, always here. It worked this time. It's Jason Morgan.
I'm here. I have appeared.
How was fishing?
It was fantastic. I was fishing for trucks.
Oh, for
and
trucks.
Equipment.
Wow.
I know. Caught some new VNLs on the heavy duty side. I caught some new engine oil on the light duty side. And now we're about to catch some medium duty.
I think we need to look at your fishing license because that doesn't sound regulated.
I am officially licensed to drive those trucks.
Don't have to drive those trucks. Well, today we are driving into a bit of a change in the market, a little bit of a demographic shift that we are seeing. More younger generations, more women are buying trucks. So how is that affecting buying strategies? What are fleets doing to work with this information? Let's find out. I want to welcome in our guest today, Charles Bowles from Commercial Truck Trader. Charles, you're the Director of Commercial Truck OEM and Strategic Initiatives, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, let's get into these questions. In a recent report, Commercial Truck Trader noted that a demographic shift is happening, moving towards more work trucks being bought by women and younger generations. Was this something that you were tracking, like a growing trend, or is it more surprising?
It's a little of both. We're surprised at the velocity of the growth. You know, we are able to utilize a lot of surveys with Commercial Truck Trader, a lot of people coming to the site. You know, we have 2.2 million monthly visitors coming. So we're able to compile a lot of data. And one thing that we've been tracking, and I think everybody's seen this, is the trucking industry as a whole has evolved significantly over the past decade even. According to our most recent survey, we're seeing 1/3 of the buyers on the site are female, which if you go back and look, even a decade ago, that number would have been 90% men, 10% female. So we also noticed as well that the average age of prospective buyers is decreasing significantly, particularly in Class 8s. And I know we talk a lot about medium duty here, but the demo has really had a decided shift for the heavy duty trucks. And it's just been an interesting phenomenon to watch.
So just as varied as those buyers are these applications that the work trucks are going into. And I want to dig into the demographics here in a second, but can you give us an idea of maybe what's big in the work truck world? Are there any types of builds or any trucks for specific applications that are really big right now?
We can take a look at demand for specific vehicles, which is interesting, you know, because we have so many users coming to the site, and this isn't a commercial for us. But we have the luxury of observing millions and millions of searches each month, and it gives us a lot of access to empirical data. And so then we can measure what people are actually buying. You know, what are they looking at? So I've got a list here of some interesting vehicles, and what I find fascinating is that the category of dump truck is almost always at the top of demand in the medium duty space, classes 4 through 7. It's interesting though, because for a while there, it was box trucks. And that was because of the sudden surge in online sales due to the pandemic. We saw, you know, that nonstop interest in middle mile and last mile delivery companies and their need for the vehicles. But that's kind of flattened out somewhat, and we're seeing dump trucks coming at the top. Another one we see is utility vehicles, service bodies. They're really popular right now as well. I do think it's interesting to look at the top categories by class. And so I'm going to just run through top categories 4 through 7. So
yeah, please do.
Class 4 is the box truck, which makes kind of sense. Class 4 trucks are having an issue with a lack of demand right now, which is we're going to continue to watch, because I'm not at all pleased with the day's supply that we're seeing with Class 4 trucks of all categories. But in the Class 4 category, the box truck is the number one demand vehicle that we see, and we measure demand. By the way, if you go to Commercial Truck Trader or Truck Paper, any of those sites, you'll get a list of search results. When you click on a particular search result and then look at the vehicle detail page, we consider that much higher buyer intent, and that's what we really use as a gauge. And then the next step is what action is taken. So when we talk about demand, what we're talking about is not, how many searches there were or whatever, but really how many views of specific vehicles there are by category and make, model, all that stuff. So Class 4 is the box truck. Class 5 is the dump truck, which in many cases can also include large landscape dumps. Right. And Class 6, again, is box trucks, the very big ones. And Class 7 is dump trucks. So you can see that dumps and box trucks are really dominating right now, but there's also a great deal of interest in chassis cabs. There was a dearth of them for so long during the pandemic because manufacturers shifted away from just producing chassis cabs to producing some of their more expensive, higher margin vehicles. And so chassis cabs kind of sat in the background along with supply chain issues as well, rubber, metal, all those things that were hard to come by. So chassis cabs are big, flatbeds are big right now, bucket and boom trucks, wrecker and tow trucks, rollbacks, and utility and service bodies are really big ones too. So those really round out the major categories.
So it seems like, as you're saying, demand is kind of up across the work truck market right now. And I want to touch on that a little bit. Are fleets placing large truck orders? Are you seeing big orders come through? Or is it mostly like little by little, people are filling in gaps that they don't have, or maybe owner operators are chipping in to get 1 or 2 trucks? And what does that signal for the market?
It's an interesting question here because demand is waning. So when we talk about what we saw is in particular categories, what's popular, it doesn't mean that these are all exceptional growth categories. We're seeing a pullback now. Pent-up demand really caused that burst of buyer activity at the end of the supply chain issues, as we talked about a second ago. And, once inventory shortages abated, we saw and we're seeing demand leveling off. We're still seeing higher sales than we saw last year, but production is really outpacing demand right now. So inventory is growing on dealer lots. So the fleet buyers have really caught back up in many cases. And what's happened though is production has continued to grow. So we're seeing day supply enormously higher over than it was last year. And we talked about Class 4 vehicles a second ago. And we have some Class 4 categories, both on dealer lots and on the site, that have been on for sale for more than 6 months. And when you think about it, most dealerships, they look for a 55 to 60 day supply of vehicles when all things are good. So when you have 6 months or 180 day supply, that vehicle is really costing you money. And as we see production eclipsing demand, it's going to be a challenge, and we don't see that ending anytime soon. It's not the case for every vehicle, but it is for most. And one of the reasons is the cost of money is so high right now. It's a genuine problem in this industry with interest rates and really tight credit terms. And if you bought a vehicle during the pandemic, you can be upside down because residual values have really cratered, making many pandemic era buyers upside down. And if you look at that in addition for, let's say, Class 7 and Class 8 for longer hauls, low freight rates, both spot and contract, have made it so difficult for people to get into the business, stay in the business, and deal with those other things associated with what we just talked about. It's just a confluence of a lot of obstacles right now.
Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcox Media.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking earlier this week about the market. And I think one of the things that stood out was a comment that we are in a market correction right now, right? Given how topsy-turvy everything's been, it doesn't really feel like we think it should, but we are. So when you look at all your demographic information for your buyers and all the trends that are going on in types of trucks they're buying, how do you look at it, and what do you suggest for people in terms of how they can better their positions, right? You think work truck fleets in the market, they're going to have some truck turnaround times. We got some new legislation and regulations that are coming down the line in terms of what trucks are going to need to be purchased and put in action. What are you looking at here in the coming months and years?
Well, this is not really a news flash, but any of us who have been talking about these regulations and mandates, particularly as it pertains to EVs, we're in a challenging situation because there is a ratio that manufacturers have to hit in terms of ICE versus EV.
Yep.
And they may have to pull back production on ICE vehicles in order to meet those ratios because the penalties are so great per vehicle that goes over that. So, that's one of the things that we look at right now is until we can get those mandates or guidelines, relaxed, what can we do to help drive some of that EV business? And it's just a real challenge because we've seen that the early adopters have adopted, like municipalities or large delivery fleets, that have the wherewithal to be able to do that kind of stuff. But when you talk about your average commercial buyer or commercial fleet buyer, there's range anxiety, there's charger anxiety, there's total cost of ownership challenges, related to, all kinds of things. And residual values have turned upside down. So there's a lot of challenges there. So if we were talking about buying strategies right now, I would really recommend that manufacturers focus some of their efforts on going after women, and we'll talk about that in a second with demographics, and younger buyers, because the younger buyers and have become more diverse and they're more research based in their buying process. So if an OEM and its dealer network don't have a strong information based website, they're not going to capture this new iteration of buyers. Somebody who does it well is Navistar International. They do a lot of focus on making sure that women are addressed, their concerns, they're just part of the whole process, and it's really I commend International for what they're doing, and I think a lot of manufacturers should focus that way as well.
So, your comments about the EV adoption is really interesting too. And I kind of think back to your comment earlier about the cost of money, right? Because not only do you have range anxiety and all those other questions, but now to get this funded and get a loan to pay for the vehicle or even charging infrastructure, that costs way more than it did 2 years ago when a lot of these are rolling out. So I know there's pressure on the manufacturers. There's clearly pressure on the fleets and the costs there. Any thoughts on how the dealers are viewing this as those trucks sit on their lot?
Wow. Yes. I've been to a number of dealer group franchise meetings, and manufacturers representatives have been there. And the pushback is just enormous. And I always pray, because I presented a lot of these things, and I pray that I get up there and present before the manufacturer's rep does, because everybody is so upset after they hear some of what the manufacturer said about, here's what you have to do, and here's what we're selling. And I know you don't like to sell, but you've got to sell these things. The dealers are better trained than they ever have. Commercial salespeople really understand EVs. The challenge is that the market doesn't yet, and it's really put the dealer in a very difficult situation. EVs are perfect for scheduled routes, for things that people understand, or, small contractors, but trying to educate them is just a really difficult battle. And it's particularly difficult for a dealer, a commercial salesman who's got so many other things to do, and she doesn't have time really to spend focusing on getting that outreach and education. It's really it's a manufacturer problem. that they're going to have to figure out a way to really help these dealers. And I hear it at every single meeting. Even if we're just a state trooper is talking about DOT rules, it always comes back to EV questions to the manufacturer, and it's really it's top of mind with dealers. And I know that manufacturers understand that, but they're under the gun too, because the regulations are the regulations. Until the regulations change, they're going to have to try their best to comply.
It's a very complex situation still developing, obviously. EVs, alternative fuels, it goes way beyond supply and demand and what you see in a headline. So a lot of research to be done. And it sounds like newer generations are into doing that research. And maybe this is a good platform for them to learn more. Charles, we want to thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
A lot of good information coming from Charles. Box trucks, dump trucks, chassis cab.
Yeah.
I mean, those kind of didn't take me too much by surprise, but there were some surprising revelations about EVs.
Yeah. I think everyone's still trying to figure that out. I get it. The regulations needed to be aggressive early on because they had to motivate the industry. But now that we're here, the industry or the manufacturers did their job. The reality is a little more complicated than not. I think that might be its own podcast in and of itself, right? There's a lot to dig into. We've talked a lot about it, but really the dealer perspective was interesting that Charles talked about. Going back to the trends, though, I was interested in Class 5 dump because you think that's not, he mentioned the landscape side, true. Also, utilities, municipalities, that kind of size dump truck makes sense for them, in addition to the other bodies that he mentioned, utility bodies, the wrecker bodies, those kind of things. A lot of going into a lot of municipalities. Interesting, and his point about, I know I mentioned it in the interview too, but his point about the cost of money, right? Interest rates being so high, it impacting acquisition rates for new equipment. Lots of headwinds in the market right now as we go into it.
Yeah, and that the municipality angle does kind of make sense why some of them might have EVs, because they have they have support,
right?
And they can access that easier. Good for last mile, smaller things like that, vehicles to get around. But it's a very complex field. Certainly, talking about electrification, alternate fuels, work trucks, there's a lot of classes to go over and a lot of vehicle types to talk about, which is why we made this show. Signing off for today from Medium Duty at Large, I'm Kevin Linger.
I'm Jason Morgan.
We'll see you next time.